Okay, cool. Well, welcome back to the Breaking Ice podcast. My name is Josh Ferguson, your host, and today we're sitting down with Paulie Chinna, our former MLA from the last term. And Paulie and I actually worked together a bunch at the end of her term and the beginning of her the election, and it was an awesome experience. And we've stayed in touch ever since. So I'm happy that we have the chance to sit down today and kind of talk about your experience of what like running in that election was like, what your experience was like in the is it the caucus? Is that the right word? No.
In the assembly.
In the assembly. And then kind of now how you're doing, how you're feeling, life after the election, etc. And then kind of moving into what you're moving towards now. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Awesome. Sweet. Yeah. All right.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be a part of the podcast, to be honest. We spoke about it before, and that this is something that you thought about, and now it's coming to life. So it's exciting to be here right now, and just to be a part of the whole experience. And it's something that's so great for the Sawtoo and for the people. I want to say, even like throughout Canada, to hear who we are, what are we about, and our existing. Ongoing revolving situations that are happening here in the north. So
well, that's just it, right? Like, kind of my perspective was we have like traditional media outlets like Kevin Radio and CBC, and they do coverage and whatnot, but then kind of there's not much in between that and like fit local community Facebook comments. So I wanted to kind of help create something where we could sit down and have longer conversations and kind of get into the weeds a little bit and get to know people for who they are, to just know each other better. I feel like one of the biggest barriers to humans succeeding with each other is just knowing each other. Yeah, so that's kind of like my goals here.
I'm so excited for this opportunity as well, because it absolutely it does give the public an introduction to actually get to know the person genuinely, of actually who they are besides the public portfolios and the public titles.
Yeah.
And it gets to we get to have that intimate connection. So I
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, yeah, tell me. Let's start at the beginning. How was being an MLA? What's that like?
It was quite an extraordinary experience, and I took it genuinely, right to the heart. When I ran in the election in 2019, I had this fierce energy that this is what I wanted to do. This is what I was born to do, and I wasn't discouraged by any means. I just had. Had an experience listening to Stephen Cackway in high school, and listening to him, and he was the Minister of Education, and I knew this is what I wanted to do. And I followed Ethel Blondin as well too, Nellie Cornier as well, and the evolving of Dene Nation, the history in the Northwest Territories. So this wasn't something I just thought of overnight. This was something I've thought about since my youth. So now life has happened, and I felt I was ready. I just had this urge in my heart. I had this passion, and it was time. I worked for the government for 20 years prior to the election. I had a clear idea and a clear understanding, their policies, their legislation, their interaction with the federal government, how programs and services are drawn down to the north. I also had some time to work with the with Gashagotin and Fort Good Hope as well, and with the land claim organization, Umoga Land Corporation, at that time, and I was able to get the experience of what it meant to have a signed settled land claim and to be working within a settled land claim area. So with that experience, it also brought me to the 3 regions out of the 5 in the Northwest Territories. So I was able to work amongst the Métis, the Gwich'in, and the Nunavut as well. Extraordinary experience. So
I feel
now,
like it's pretty special to be able to kind of bridge the gap in a lot of ways between all the communities.
absolutely, and the concerns, the situations, the accomplishments, they vary throughout the territory, and we live in such a diverse, unique territory that I have so much experience, so much appreciation for. That the way that we've evolved within the last 50, 60 years is quite extraordinary. I want to say to the rest of Canada, and I feel quite passionate about how far we've come. So, so during my time, I decided that that I'm ready, and that I've come to the table with all of this experience and really understanding the Northwest Territories. So I've decided in 2019, when there was such a strong movement for women in politics, and at that time, former Premier Carolyn Cochrane and former Minister Julie Green had went on a campaign trail to recruit women, and it felt it was such an amazing experience that um, they didn't leave anybody out. They made people and women feel that we need to be heard. We are important. We need to be at the table to be a part of these discussions, that we're making decisions for children, families, poverty, infrastructure, and looking at those one-offs, like what are we able to benefit from any of these projects and any of these drawdown of services, and working directly with Indigenous governments.
So when you got elected for the first time, I feel like my biggest question is like, like no one's prepared for that job when you first start. You know what I mean? Like after 4 years, you have like a good handle on it and a good like idea of what to do. But in that first week, give me that what that was like, that first week of being an MLA.
The first week was I felt comfortable, to be honest. I was ready to go, and I was ready to be a part of this government. And I felt experienced. I felt that I had some knowledge, because I worked with the government for 20 years. So this is my employer. This is all that I've known.
Hmm.
And so I felt that I was ready to advance, and to be sitting on the other side, to start having an opinion on how services and agreements were run, that now I want to sit in a different seat.
Mm.
So that week was it was it was quite fascinating. It was probably the most, I want to say, the extravagant work that had been done, to be sitting beside the Premier of the Northwest Territories, to be sitting beside a government that's going to be elected, and wondering, are you going to actually be a part of cabinet,
Mm.
which is premier and ministers that pretty much they influence the Northwest Territories, but with the ongoing conversations with the MLAs, I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to be sitting there, and it was quite amazing.
So how did you maintain a kind of dialogue with everyday people? Because I feel like, in that kind of a position, it's important to bring forward the concerns of your constituents and whatnot. So, like, what was your strategy for just keeping a like a finger on the pulse of the public, and kind of where people were and what they were wanting / where they were needing to go?
I wanted to do things differently. So what I had noticed is that there's never been an MLA office in the Sawtooth, a constituent office. It never existed in all of the 50 years of this government. So I established an office here. I had, during my term, probably about 7 employees that were recruited throughout the Sawtooth region. So I tried to create employment, but the major point about that was to have direct contact and direct influence at the ground level. Is that I wanted people to understand, what is it that I do. So I made that opportunity open for everyone. So for them and for me to be in direct contact with them, is that I wanted to bring this home grassroots, and that the people that did work with me side by side, that these were everyday people that were interested in politics. They were interested in being a part of this experience. So we had constant communication, and social media was huge because of it was our direct contact. I want to say Facebook was probably the most influential,
Hmm.
and just gathering phone numbers as well too, and making sure that every person we contacted, that we do have their cell phone number, and getting into the communities, hosting lunches. I still did the door to door. I still had an ongoing list of people that had very different situations that I needed to follow up on. So I maintained those relationships. But to have a constant presence at that time, respectfully, we had so many emergencies within that government. We had floods, fires, COVID, evacuations. And so it really took away from, I want to say, a constant presence probably within the first 2 years.
Mm.
And so that's where the phone calls were so important. That's where Facebook was so important. And the indigenous governments as well too were quite active at that time because there was a lot of federal money that was flowing in response to evacuations and in response to COVID. So so the public was not acknowledged. We had to really look at food security. We had to look at there was also the limited number of flights coming into the communities as
Mm.
well too. I remember one of the communities had a flight that came in, and I advocated to say that we're out of basic needs: Pampers, coffee, water, and we needed to get these planes in. But the flight had come in, and the flight was empty. And this was because we were in such a major emergency throughout the Northwest Territories, that Yellowknife was not able to accommodate all the needs for each of the
Is this
communities
during the fires?
during the fires, but during COVID,
Yeah.
yeah, especially.
Yeah,
And
same kind of thing.
yeah, so all the emergencies just equaled out to the equivalent responses. So it was quite a different government, I want to say. But the amount of money that was flowing into the Sawtooth at that time was quite interesting, because there was a lot of opportunity as well too.
What would you say, like on a personal note, was like the most challenging thing for you? Like, absent COVID and the fires and whatnot, obviously those were massive challenges and really difficult to, for the government to get a handle on. But for you, what was the least expected, most challenging thing?
The least expected was, unfortunately, there was a lot of passings.
Mm.
There was so many passings that I've never seen a number like that before. And so mental health became such a huge need in the region. Medical care became such a huge need as well too. And looking at the mental health supports, there's a lot of people who are grieving. And I've been to so many funerals throughout the Sawtooth that it was something that I didn't expect, but it made me realize and understand that the lack of services that we actually do have here, and just supporting one another. And it's so important just to check up on each other randomly, for nothing.
Mm.
Just how was your day, and just to genuinely offer that support for everybody. And I make a huge effort of it in making sure that you just simply say hi, and you just simply get out of your way to making sure that people are well, because the number of passings that we've had in that 4 years, I've never seen a number like that before.
But on a more like personal note, in terms of like your own experience, like the passings were difficult, but like was it challenging for you to like figure out what the next thing to do was? Was there a motivation issue? Like I'm not trying to prescribe anything. I'm just kind of curious what your personal experience was like. What was the most challenging part for Paulie?
It was a challenge to keep on staying positive, because I experienced my family members passing away
Mm.
too. And I had experienced where my family member was had passed away in an accident, and I actually held the portfolio for that response. And it was quite challenging to get to work the next day, knowing that I was minister responsible for worker safety and compensation at that time, and that my family member had gotten hurt and ended up in a in an injury that ended up killing him. And I think that was probably the most difficult. And then further on is that I also was minister responsible for homelessness, and had a family member as well too that had passed away, that was homeless. And being able to have a political response that you come in and you have this title, but you're mourning with your family. And but then still you have a responsibility. This is your job. This is what you're elected to do.
Yeah.
And to be in attendance at those funerals and not to be there 100% to support your family, that was difficult.
That's a really unique line to walk.
Yes, it was really it was really it was painful, to be honest. And now that I've had some time to kind of step back and observe, and I thought about what that experience was like and how it affected me personally, and looking at the public and knowing where I come from. I don't come from a large family. I don't come from any connections to anything too much. It's just myself and my auntie and extended family members. And for something like this to happen, and look back at it, politicians are just regular people
Yeah.
at the ground level, wanting to represent the public, passionate about it to do it, but we're still human, and we still have human experiences, and we're not able to conquer and succeed on every single request that's brought out there. What I took away from it is what you do for one, you do for all. And I also held the responsibility for housing. So if I was going to house one person, I have to house everybody else. So it really changed my perspective as well too. But really looking at the challenges in it, and to stay motivated, and to stay determined, and to be grieving at the same time. That was difficult.
So looking back at your tenure, what are you happy with your experience? Are you happy with your performance? Like what is your perspective in a retrospective sense?
I'm satisfied,
Yeah.
to be honest. I gave it all that I had. I showed up, 1,200 days, and without a holiday, without calling in sick, without missing meetings. And I took this position very seriously, and I gave it 150%. And I kind of look back at it, and I think, COVID was real at that time, and I had COVID twice, and I still showed up to work. And I tore a ligament in my knee, and I still showed up to work.
Mm.
With sitting in session, still doing my community visits, still serving the people of the Northwest Territories. But then most of all, really wanting to connect and understand who are we as a Northwest Territories? What is it that we need? What is it that we want? And I carried the number one portfolio in the Northwest Territories, which was housing, and I felt very honored that at that time, former Premier Cochrane had given me that portfolio. And looking at just getting right to the ground level and dealing and speaking with Indigenous governments and asking them, what do you want me to do?
So having put so much effort in and really poured yourself into the work, that was evident that you were passionate about it, and it was important to you. When it came around time for the election, how much, I feel like this would be normal for anybody, but like how much of feelings of like almost self-worth are tied up into being reelected?
I was tired.
Mm.
I was exhausted. And at that time, we were dealing with Hedledici, and we're dealing with Enterprise that had lost pretty much their whole community. We were dealing with people coming back from evacuations as well too. And at that time, Yellowknife was completely evacuated. Everybody was, sent off to Alberta, and I feel that people were exhausted. I was exhausted. And here in Nassau too, we were affected by the fires, by the smoke as well too, and so much uncertainty, and the fear, and the lack of healthcare representatives as well too, and people that were suffering with asthma, people were suffering with limited mobility. It was a different time, and I feel that the region, the people of the Northwest Territories, were tired.
So after the election, we I almost am curious about the experience of like watching the votes come in. Like, what's that like? I'd never been in an election. Do you know what I mean? Like, that must be wild to see numbers kind of coming in and different, you know, groups voting and things like that. And then how long did you sleep after the results came in?
Respectfully, I was, of course, at the edge of my seat, like, and I'm human and I'm
Of
excited and,
course.
and whatever.
Yeah.
But, I had two people running against me, but I honestly felt that I wanted to continue the work. I wanted to continue working with Indigenous governments. I left the region at 100 million in housing. We have school counselors now, and in response to like our healthcare needs as well. And I wanted to continue working on those files, but but then at that time, I was watching the votes come in, and respectfully, I thought, well, the region has spoken, and whether they wanted to reemploy me or not was up to them. But the next day, I felt like almost a sense of relief,
Hmm.
and I felt that respectfully, this is what the region decided. So I was at peace with it, and I went into the election in 2019 knowing that this is a 4-year term. It was kind of like an hourglass for me,
Hmm.
that I just had a certain amount of days, hours, minutes, and my time is going to run out. So what am I going to be doing within that time? What am I going to accomplish? And how am I going to connect this? How am I going to work with the people and with the region? And now that I look back at it, I'm extremely satisfied that I highlighted the importance of working within a settled land claim area, and working with self-government negotiations and what that would actually mean for drawdown of jurisdictions and services for the territorial government, and respectfully looking at how our region would evolve. Um, and I want to say that with the numbers coming in, I was I was comfortable with it, to be honest. And I sat at the edge of my seat, but like I had said, that's what the region had decided, and my time was up. And but it doesn't stop me though. Like,
Sure.
politics is still what I want. I still want to be in those political seats, and I feel that it's time for my generation to be a part of it. And I didn't see anybody from my generation that had submitted their names, so it's almost quite concerning
Hmm.
that that I see a lot of um, the generation before me is quite interested. I want to say, and I see them evolving in their wellness. Like, there's a number of camps going out there. We've got people from the region that have traveled to Paris, that have traveled to Ottawa, that had all of these major presentations. And we see a lot to conserve and protect our wildlife and our land. And we see a lot of wellness camps that are happening as well. So I'm quite optimistic for that generation to come up, because I think they're so creative. And but we'll see in time what that looks like.
So then how, like, clearly you must have rested after the election. And was that like you said you were exhausted, so it must have been much needed. And I feel like the experience of having such a broad scope of responsibilities to then just being like, oh, I can just take care of myself right now. Like, that must have been a weird shift.
It was interesting. I've never experienced this in all my life. And I thought, okay, so December 7th was my last day of work. And the new government was now elected. And here we go. And I closed up my office. I went through what I needed to go through. And I remember walking and leaving the assembly. And I was thankful. I was thankful to God. I was thankful to Creator. I was thankful to the people of the Sawtooth for trusting me
Hmm.
to represent them in this huge assembly, to be sitting across and to be a part of this government, to represent the Sawtooth and all of our history, all of it that we had brought into the table. I tried very hard to earn that recognition and that respect that this is who we are as a Sawtoo. There's opportunity and we're very successful. So I was quite, it was quite an honor, very much an honor that I got to be a part of history. And at that time, the government was elected, 19 members, and 10 of them were women. Has never happened throughout Canada. We made history for Canada. And also being a part of cabinet, 5 women out of 7, and it was quite remarkable. And leaving that building was such an honor to represent the region. And 1,200 days.
Yeah. I
1,200
actually hadn't
days.
thought of it like that. Like when you get elected, you really have like, there's like a term, and the hourglass reference is really accurate. And I hadn't actually thought of it like that. It's like, every day that you don't get something done is like, feels like a day wasted.
Absolutely. You
Yeah.
are running this rat race. But the other thing that is really, that I want to describe is that it's like you're in this, you're in this arena.
Mhm.
Everybody wants what you have and they want to enhance it, or they want to motivate it, or they want to do something with it. So you got to be in there and you got to be very strategic that it benefits the people of the Northwest Territories. And when you have specific projects and that you're in there, that the strategy comes alive, the work comes alive, and you cannot afford to miss a meeting. You cannot afford to miss a day. You can't afford to miss a briefing note. And it was something to really, you don't even have time to get training. You're just in there and you got to go. I remember when I got elected, 800 pages delivered to me, had to be reviewed by the morning. And I had to be on my game and ready to go and ready to comment. And there's packages and there's briefing notes and there's staff and there's people. But what I took to my heart was that every decision made at this table is affecting a person
Yeah.
at the ground level, whether they're income support, whether they're waiting in line for treatment, whether they're wanting to build a home, whether they're wanting employment, whether they just got back from South and they pursued their degree and there's no jobs.
Well, I feel like that's an important perspective to have. Do you feel like that's often lost with politicians, like that connection to the person, or do you think generally people are pretty good at maintaining that perspective? Because I feel like as a member of the public, it's easy to look at people in politics and go, well, they're not thinking about us.
Yeah.
So, what's your experience with that?
I think that's the value I brought to the table, is that I come from a smaller community. I come from an isolated region. And my first home was Honey Bucket and Waterhall. And I don't have a story of how I got here. I was born and raised here, and I didn't bring my family here. So I think when speaking in a legislative assembly, that bringing those real scenarios and that history to surface is, this is how we evolved, this is how we existed. And I just want to, and before this government had existed, we had the Indian Brotherhood, which is remarkable. And then we had Dene Nation. And then we had the creation of this government here. And there's such rich history in the Northwest Territories. And that's where my politics comes from, is from that lens and that way of thinking, is that I know what it's like to witness and be a part of where we had dog teams, where we had cabins for homes.
I was going to say, for the viewers, if they're interested in hearing more about your background and kind of more where you come from on a more vulnerable side, we have a video that we made together that's about 25 minutes long that you can watch, and Paulie really pours her heart out about her background. And I think it's such a valuable, I think the video is worthwhile because it gives you a sense about where she comes from and who she is. So if you're interested in that, I'll leave a link below. But yeah, So now where are you headed? Where are you kind of aiming yourself?
So, like I said, like politics is where I want to be. I look at it like, I could be a teacher, I could be a nurse, I could be anything, but I choose politics. I want to be at those tables, and I want to be speaking on behalf of the people of the Northwest Territories. And I feel that there's a lot of opportunity, missed opportunity in some sort as well. And I feel that women need to be a part of those discussions. And I think it's time, and our perspectives bring a lot of value as well. And
And you must feel even more primed and ready now, having the experience of being in government, like in that, like in a leadership role.
absolutely. And I think it all comes full circle for me, is that, being an employee, I know what it's like to be pushing that paper and preparing for the minister. I know what it's like to get those briefing notes together and reviewing those legislations and then the policies and whatever. So, and then also be sitting at those tables and being able to have those conversations with the prime minister, having those conversations with the federal government as well too, and those respected ministers as well, but really having them to try to understand what is it like for the Northwest Territories. And I want to continue those conversations. I want to continue that success. And within my time, working side by side with the Indigenous governments was so valuable within the portfolios that I did carry, because at the end of the day, the number that I left was 600 million in housing money to the north, and 100-unit public housing unit rollout. We've never seen that in a number of 4 decades, and and to have the money given to the Indigenous governments, I want to say that hasn't happened. I want to say since the 1980s, since we started to build HAP units. And this is a perspective I brought to the table, because that's the value of being born and raised in the Northwest Territories. Is I've seen that, and I've seen the Northwest Territories evolve, and I've seen it develop. So I'm quite excited. So now that, I've submitted my nomination for Dene Nation. So, I'm campaigning right now and for a national chief for the Northwest Territories. And just within that I want to be a part and represent the Indigenous people of the Northwest Territories, but working side by side with Indigenous governments that have evolved through Dene Nation, and respectfully the Indigenous governments as well too, that are still in negotiations. And I feel that our treaty right is that we need to have control now, and we need to be sitting beside each government. We're so unique in partnership.
So clearly, the roles and responsibilities of this new position that you're aiming for are vastly different from MLA. So do you want to kind of lay those out for us?
So there's such a strong history when it comes to Dene Nation as well, and the evolvement and the understanding of Indigenous people throughout the Northwest Territories. And the difference between that and being an MLA is that, you're structured with the rest of Canada, and you're abiding by Canada, where I look at the territorial government as almost like a representation. But I feel that the Indigenous governments are very strong, and they're very vocal. They're very successful in our territory. And I think Dene Nation can now add so much more value and so much more strength, so much more power in respect to infrastructure, in respect to even to respond to our addictions and our mental health, and our treaty rights to education. And where can we meet both side by side? And with the role as Dene Nation, that I would like to work very closely with Premier and Cabinet. And I feel that working throughout the Northwest Territories and wanting to represent Denendeh is going to be, it's quite an honor to be sitting side by side with Indigenous governments.
So when is the election? When kind of give me a timeline for all this, and how you're feeling, and your how you plan to campaign.
So right, I'm extremely excited. Of course, like I said, the politics is my thing, and this is where I want to be. And so in every election, I've always been quite excited, and this is going to be my third one now. But but I plan to get to the South Slave and start visiting the communities. I want to meet face to face. I want to get some material out there and just get the communities to meet me and to see my passion and to see what it is that I would like to see for Dene Nation. But then also, it's quite interesting that I'm the only candidate from the North. So we don't have a candidate from that resides like in the Beaufort Delta or the Sawtooth.
Oh,
So
interesting.
yeah, so it's gonna be quite remarkable. All of the other candidates, they're from the South Slave, and I'm quite excited. Norman Yakalaya had submitted as well too, so he was former national chief as well too. So and uh, and there's another respectfully April Martel, who's the chief of Hedladichi. So it's going to be quite exciting. Like I'm really excited to get out
That's
there.
awesome. That's so cool. And yeah. So wait, I'm not sure if you said this. When is the election / when is the timeline for this?
The timeline is July 14th to July 24th is voting.
This year.
So yes,
Oh,
yeah,
right around the corner.
yeah, absolutely, yes, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's like now.
So since since the I guess the nominations have been finalized and whatever, that I've been in contact with the chiefs throughout the Northwest Territories, introducing myself and just really hearing and listening to what it is that they want to see, and I want to work for them. So it's not I don't want to have the position if I'm elected. um, I want to be working side by side with them, and I want to be able to represent them fairly. And I'm excited that that I want to strategically work with the chiefs throughout the Northwest Territories and really come up with a mandate, mission statement, and priorities, and what is it that they want to accomplish in the next 4 years. And I'm excited. Give me an assignment. I want to complete it.
Yeah. And do you feel like it's been an adequate rest?
I feel absolutely. I feel that I'm ready. And December 7th, I said was my last day of work, and now we're looking at what is it, June 5th, June 6th,
Hmm.
and I feel rested. I feel like I'm ready to go. I've had some time to reflect. I've had some time to reconnect with myself, reconnect with my region, and just really appreciating the experience that I've had, and I hope it's really influenced a lot of young women, that if they're wanting to make those career changes, if they want to go back to school, if they want to excel or do whatever in their life, that take that chance, take that opportunity. And I'm always going through life that you get one chance to be here. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah. And so what did you do for yourself over the last few months? Did you travel? Did you spend some time on the land? Did you visit family? Like what did you do to kind of fill your cup back up before you dove back in?
I reconnected with family, absolutely. Yeah, reconnected with family, spent a lot of time at home. I have a lot of home renovations that need to be done that still haven't been complete. I need to get organized. And, I've got a lot of stuff that had just sat there for the last 4 years, but just really getting to know myself and appreciating what it has taken for me to get to this point, and really reflecting on all of that put together. I was even thinking about writing a book. Like,
Oh,
it's kind of like floating around in the back of my head. And this one trip I had taken to Iqaluit to meet the housing minister last year. So when I was in the airport in Ottawa, I picked up this book that was written by Afghanistan women, and it was called "We Are Still Here." And it was filled with such extraordinary stories of resilience. I was so intrigued. My passion started to bubble, and just hearing their stories of what it has taken for them to want to represent women equally in their country, and what they had to endure in order for them to simply be a part equally of society.
hmm.
And we don't really see it like fairly done today, but then there is a movement that they do have. So it made me feel that and understand and see and recognize that we have a number of Indigenous women throughout the Northwest Territories that are just silently making such strong movement, but we don't recognize and we don't see them. So that's kind of what's kind of like in the back of my head, is that I would like to put those stories and have it available to the public, and having the North and the country, and that we do have such accomplished women in the North, and we need to be more a part of decision making. We need to be at these tables. We need to be included in a lot of movement in the North, and we have so much expertise to offer as well too.
So what was the biggest change that you experienced in yourself from Paulie before or at the beginning of your last term, and then Paulie now, and how you would kind of do the next one? Obviously it's a different role, but how have you grown?
I want to say that was the first word that came to my head, is growth, extreme growth, like just really understanding and looking at what actually matters, and actually looking at life, that personally, that, we're only here for a limited amount of time, and to not take it for granted, and to really tell your story. And I feel that everybody has such resilience of how they got to this point, and it made me recognize and made me really indulge into the success, I want to say, that we all have within ourselves. And it doesn't have to be, this extraordinary, this politician, and you're in the media, and you're doing whatever, but personally, to be the best and do the best you ultimately can, and to leave such a strong legacy behind, that you influence everyone else to want to be better.
And I think what's at least in my perspective, what's important about that message that you just said is that you don't necessarily need to be in a political role or in a very important role to do that within your community. And people should aim for that.
And I feel, lead with your passion. If you thought about it, and if you dreamt it, and if you're still thinking about it the next day, you're meant to do it. And the other thing is not to be shy about disappointment, because I want to say that's the other thing I learned, is to overcome disappointment, to overcome where...
I thought I turned that off. 1 second. To overcome disappointment.
And to be all right with it, to be okay to be criticized, to be all right to be given a number of decisions to be made, but really seeking within yourself and understanding, is this good for the region? Is this good for the North? And not to be scared or not to be shy to receive disappointment and criticism, but to actually grow from it.
Yeah.
And what I do differently now is I welcome criticism. I welcome it so much, because I feel that if I'm not doing something appropriate or right, there's a message within that message. The point is not the criticism. The point is that there's room for improvement, and to just pay attention a little bit more. And the other one was respecting your own personal growth, and honoring the person that you're becoming.
Yeah. So what are your do you have anxieties about the coming election? Do you have hopes? Do you have, where's your mindset around that?
I feel comfortable, to be honest. Of course, I would have anxiety because, like I said, I'm human, and I'm excited, and I'm happy, and I'm thriving, and I'm just have all of these ideas and thoughts of, what I would do within these political positions, and how I want to open the doors for women and for the younger generation to step up and not to be shy, not to be scared, because we need them. And we need them to be front and center, and we need to encourage them that their opinion matters. Like, how are they going to design their world? I'm a part of it. I'm a part of a circle, and I'm a part of contributing. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be somebody that's more, somebody that has a different perspective, somebody that has value. We're always going to be on the same page, but then we're always going to have a different set of skills, and we need it. So I'm just a part of evolving, I want to say.
So I got two questions. One is, if someone is listening to this and they're younger and they're looking at their future and they're not sure what they want to do, and maybe they're interested in politics, but that seems really scary. What's your message to them? How do they get involved? How do they kind of like tiptoe into the world without, how do they tiptoe into that world?
I want to say to really get involved and really indulge in it, and understand how does the territorial government work, because they've got their own way of governing. How do the Indigenous governments work? And respectfully looking at the history. And for me, I didn't go to school to learn this. I think being here in the Northwest Territories added so much value, because we have so many rich movements in the North, that if I were to study, and I was told this by a professor that I had met, and I wanted to become a lawyer. At the beginning of my life, that's what I was determined to do. I wanted to become a lawyer. It didn't happen. So I met this professor and I explained this to her, and she said, you know what? If you became a lawyer and you studied South, your perspectives would have been different.
Mm.
She said that I've learned so much from you than I've done in my own study, and understanding Indigenous people, and understanding the Northwest Territories and its involvement. There's more passion there. There's more understanding. It's more of an intimate conversation. So I took that and I appreciate that. But I think for the younger people and anybody that wanted to get involved in politics, what I had done is I YouTubed, to be honest. I looked at Stephen Cacquet. I listened to Nellie Cornier, and I looked at the movement for Indian Brotherhood, COPE, Denonation. And this is not taught in books, which is really unfortunate, because we have such a vast, rich territory with
Well,
such
it's
history.
not necessarily something that you could teach in books, you know?
But it's the history that
Yeah,
comes
the history.
forward.
Fair enough.
Like we hear a lot in the South. We hear a lot about the Cree, the Mohawk, Anishinaabe, and there's a lot of history there. But for the Northwest Territories, all of this is I haven't read it, I haven't seen it, and it's just where I've attended meetings where I'm from the Northwest Territories, and I've had the opportunity of I guess I could throw this in there too, is when my mom was alive, she worked for CBC. So I was a part of all those denonation meetings. I was a part of all of those, being a part of the involvement of Indian Brotherhood, and just sitting there as a little girl, just sitting there like this, and just watching my mom work, listening to her work. But then I started to develop a passion for it. And as I grew older and I remembered those conversations, I remember where we were sitting, and what that was about. And that's the education that she had given me without me even recognizing or understanding it at that time.
So maybe a first step for somebody might be like, hey, go talk to your land corp and see if there's anything you can do to help out there. Like, just like an actionable thing. Like if someone wants to get involved, and they're 18, what do they do?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I started off, to be honest, is I worked with the band in Fort Good Hope. I worked with the Umoga Land Corporation as well too, and with the government. And then I was able to get some exposure to the Nuvialwit, to the Gwich'in, to the South Slave, to the Métis, and it just kind of grew. And you just end up receiving an interest. But for anybody that wants to get involved in politics, I highly encourage it. And just really paying attention to what is happening in the region. But then that's one component. But also understanding what is it like to represent at the Legislative Assembly. What is it like to represent for denonation or within your own Indigenous government? And what is it like to represent as MP? Who knows? We still need an Indigenous Prime Minister, so I'm optimistic. Absolutely.
And then for listeners who might be voting in the upcoming election this July, and they're undecided about who they're supporting, if you had to like kind of put it into like a neat little bundle, why should they support you?
I want to work for Denonday, and I want to represent the chiefs. I want to work side by side. I don't want to be in there telling them what to do. I want to be a part of their discussions. And I think it's time that we recognize our accomplishments as Denonday, and recognize the respectful representations around the table that have now settled in their land claims, that have now settled in self-government. And I want to work on, like I said, the mandate, the mission statement, and the priorities. And I want to give the power back to their communities and back into the hands of the chiefs. And I want to be able to work with AFN as well too, and really understand, how are we funded? Are we funded adequately? Because being a former minister of municipal and community affairs, there was often talk about, we have a funding gap, and do we have a funding gap for chief and councils? Does that need to be revisited? And but most of all, really understanding the social impacts and the treaty rights, and what does Canada need to abide by, need to recognize, and what is their obligation through those treaty rights to offer more services to our Indigenous communities. And are we missing out on opportunities as well too? And are we not being heard fairly? And just within AFN as well too, that's going to be a whole different organization to be a part of, a whole different approach, a whole different government. And I'm wanting to understand it. And I want the Northwest Territories to be loud at those tables. I want them to be heard. I want us to be recognized that, yes, we are a part of Canada. There are other provinces, there are other jurisdictions, but I feel that AFN could be more present in the Northwest Territories.
Awesome. Well, where can people find you? Where can they follow you if they're looking for you online? Do you want to kind of shout out those, like your handle or whatnot?
So right now I just have a Facebook page, and and running in this election is quite different. It's traditional, and they go by the DENA laws as well too, and that it's quite different. It's very open, and I want to say that there's a lot of room to be creative. So I will be, right now I still have my MLA Facebook page, and I will be changing that to candidacy for national chief, and to be contacted, and whatever, that if anybody has any questions, I want them to contact me through Facebook. I'll be in the communities. I'll be making those announcements as well, and just having those conversations face to face. But what I want the public to really understand as well too is that the representation that they have as a person, as in the Northwest Territories, is that you do have your MLA, you do have your chiefs, you do have your presidents, but you also will have your national chief. Now, if I do get elected, I want to be more present in the communities. I want to be more accessible to people. I want to be able to understand them right from the grassroots. I understood them territorially, but I want to understand them throughout Denendeh and throughout treaty rights. And what is it that I want, they want me to do for them.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming in today. Thanks for sitting down, and I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to have a chance to talk in an extended way. And we can throw up communication links at the end of the podcast here so people can reach out to you if you want to help Paulie Chinna out, if you want to collaborate in some way, if you have feedback or criticism or etc. She welcomes it. And I think that, I think that kind of keeping those lines of communication moving forward is always a good and positive thing. Any last words?
I just thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm quite excited for this because there's no podcast that exists like this throughout the Northwest Territories. So it gives us quite an opportunity, like just speaking and highlighting the real issues that are happening. And also I appreciate that for the public to get to know either their elects, their former elects, people that are just wanting to make differences in the territory, and having this opportunity is great, and thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I want to, obviously this platform's open to anyone who wants to come on, and they can reach out to me, Josh at breakingiceproductions.com. I'll put that at the end as well. But if there's anyone that you can think of, Paulie, that you think would be good to have on, good to hear from, please recommend them. I'd love to host them and give them a space to either tell us about themselves, tell us about their work, or even just tell traditional stories. I think it'd be really cool to have elders on and kind of just be like, hey, like let's hear it. Like, tell me one of your favorite legends, one of your favorite stories, and about the region, and we can kind of just put that out there for people to listen to.
That's great.
Yeah, awesome. Yes. Well, thanks for coming on. I'm sure this is not the last time that we'll do this, and if you want to talk about any other issues or anything in the future, by all means, you're welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Cheers.
Merci.